Welcome to another episode of JavaScript tutorial series for beginners. In this video, we're going to learn about JavaScript functions. So what's a JavaScript function? When should we use it? We're going to learn everything in this video. So I have written a simple code, two lines of code saying hello and world. If I execute this code, we're just printing hello and world. Now, suppose I want to execute these two lines multiple times. One way to do that is using a loop that we have learned in my last video, right? But suppose you want to execute these two lines in different parts of your code. For example, let's say I have some condition. If something is, if a is greater than 4, 5, then do something, else do something. So there are different places in the code, right? Suppose in line number 7 you want to execute these two lines, in line number 9 you want to execute these two lines. So how will you do that? How will you group these two lines together in some container so that you can use that in many different places? That is where functions comes into picture. If we wrap these two lines in a container, then we can execute that container multiple times. Let's give you an example here. So let's write some basic function. So to write a function, you have to start your code with a keyword called function in JavaScript. Then you have to give some function name. Let's say I can give a name like print hello world. This is the function name. Then I'm adding parentheses, and after that some curly braces. These curly braces are creating a block. Inside that block you can write some code. Suppose I'm going to write these two lines of code here. This creates one function, and you can see this is a block of code with a name, that is print hello world. Now this name becomes your function name, and you can use this name to execute these two lines of code whenever you want. For example, if I call it just right away over here, print hello world, then I'm going to use this parentheses, then this line is going to execute this code. If I do this twice, then it's going to execute these two lines twice. Now let's execute this, and you can see I'm printing hello world two times. Now for example, now let's say I want to execute this function conditionally. So let's say I have one variable, let a equals to 5. Now I have one condition, if a is greater than 4, then execute this function. So now if I execute this, it will execute, but if I reduce the value to 3, it will not execute, right? So the bottom line is we are creating a group of code with a name so that you can execute those lines multiple times and whenever and wherever you want. So that is the basic idea of a function. Now another key thing you need to learn about a function is that the function can have some parameters. Let me give you an example. So instead of printing hello world, suppose you want to make the second line dynamic. So instead of saying hello world, you want to say something like hello some person name. How will you do that? You have these parentheses, right? Using these parentheses you can send some value in a function. I'm going to execute this print hello world, or let's say the function name is just print, nothing else. Or let's say it is greet, function name is greet because we're saying hello. If I call this function over here greet, this greet function is going to greet hello world. Now suppose I want to execute this function in many different ways. Let's say first time I want to greet to the world, and then I'm going to execute something else, let's say the sky, and after that I'm going to greet the galaxy. Greet world, greet sky, and greet galaxy. But our code will not work, right? Because in the greet function we're always executing these two lines, that is hello world. Now we have to make this second line console log world dynamic code. How will you do that? So as we're passing this value in the greet function, we can capture that value here, and you can capture that value in a variable. Let's say the variable name is name, or I can just say who. This is the variable name. So whatever you send when you are calling this function, whatever the value you send here, that will be captured in this variable who. Now simply we can say console log who. So we are passing world here. This world will be captured by who variable, and then we can print that. So let's print this. If I execute this now, you can see hello world, then hello sky, then hello galaxy. So this is how you pass parameters in a function, also called arguments. We are passing arguments in a function. Now if you want to send multiple variables in a function, you can also do that. In the greet function, we are having one argument, right? That is who. And then in the second argument, let's say I can have something called name. And third argument, I can have something called. So now this function is accepting two parameters. So instead of one parameters, you can send two parameters, right? Let's say I'm adding some, okay, some another name, okay, like this, some string. And for the second case, as I'm not sending any variable, in the second argument, the value of name will be undefined. All right. So this is the way to send different arguments in a function. So this is one way of writing a function, but this is not the only way. JavaScript provides many different ways to write a function. So here I have used this function keyword, and then function name, and then the parameters, and then the function body. But there's another way. In JavaScript, all the functions are also variables or constant, whatever you want to define it. So instead of writing a function like this, you can also start with writing a variable like let greet equals to the function. So I'm going to write a function keyword, then parameters, and then the body. This is also another way of writing the same function. And instead of using let, you can also use const, similar to any constant or any variables. So in JavaScript, this is only happens in JavaScript, not in all the other languages, that functions are also variables. There's one more way to write a function in JavaScript, that is called arrow function. So arrow function is like simpler way of writing a function where you don't have to use this keyword function. I'm going to remove this. Okay, I'm going to write another arrow function here. Constant greet equals to one arrow. I'm going to use parentheses, then the parameters, and then some arrow. Arrow can be written as equals to and greater than sign, and then your body. Now we're writing all these three ways of function. Now we have written the first way as using function keyword, starting with function keyword. In the second way, I have used the variable or constant, then I'm adding a function. And in the third way, I've written an arrow function. Now in arrow function, there are something like this. Now in the arrow function, if you have just one argument, then you can remove this parenthesis. So this is also valid. But if you don't have any argument, then you have to use this parenthesis. So this is a function with no arguments. There are some functional differences between arrow functions and the regular functions, but that is a little bit advanced topic. Even though I have created a video, you can go and watch them. But for now, you just learned that these are the different ways of writing a function. Now let's talk about the return values of function. I'm going to remove these extra function variations. Let's focus on our first function. So this function is not returning any value. Okay, let's write a different function for this example. Let's say I'm writing one calculator. I'm creating one calculator, and for that I need a function called addition, okay, or add. So I'm going to write a function called add, and that's going to take two arguments. First one is num1, second one is num2. So we have these two variables, num1 and num2. Now this function is going to return the result. Okay, I'm going to execute some, I'm going to write some expression, and then I'm going to return that addition value, return the result. So I'm going to return it like this, return, num1 plus num2. So this is an example of a function that is returning some value. All right, now if I execute this, just simply if I execute this add, let's say I'm passing 2 and 3, 2 as num1 and 3 as num2, 2 as num1 and 3 as num2, and this add function will return 2 plus 3, that is 5. But how will you capture that return value? For that you can use one variable, let result equals to add. So try to understand this line. Okay, so we are calling this function with two variables, a 2 and 3, and then we're getting the result in this result. So from the right side we're passing the values, and the left side we're getting the result. Think of it in this way, and then you can just console.log result. If I execute this now, you can see I have printed 5. Now if I want to write an arrow function, I'm going to convert this const add equals to num1 and num2, then arrow, then we're returning this value. Now in arrow function, if you're just writing one line function, then you don't have to add this return statement. You can remove these curly braces and you can simply return this num1 and num2. I'm returning this. I have added another curly brace to just evaluate this expression. So this is a one-liner add function. If I execute this, you can see it is working. Okay, now let's talk about a variable number of arguments. So in this example, I have written one function that accepts only 2 arguments, right? But suppose you want to write one add function that can add many number of arguments. Like I can pass 1, 2, 3, and let's say 6, then 8. I can pass any number of arguments. How will you handle that in a function? Okay, I'm going to write that now. So I'm going to remove this add function here, and let's write function add. I can accept arguments here like num1, num2, num3, like that. But the thing is, you don't know how many number of arguments you're going to get. So how will you write that? So for that, we have something called arguments. Generally, arguments is an array. So in this add function, even if you're not accepting any arguments here, you can access those arguments from this arguments array. So okay, let's console log that. I'm going to print the argument just to see how it is working. If I run this, you can see that I have printed these arguments. This is actually looking like an object, but this also can be accessed as array. So the zeroth value is 2, then the first value is 3, then the second value is 6, then 8, like that. So these arguments, objects or array, it is containing all the arguments that we are passing. So simply if you add one loop here, we have learned about loop in our last video, right? You can go ahead and watch that. So if we use one loop, then we can calculate all the values, right? So let's write that. We have learned about for loop, right? So I'm going to add one variable here, I equals to starting value will be 0, then I less than arguments dot length, then I plus plus. Inside the loop I can access our arguments like this, arguments then I, right? We also need one variable called result. This is a local variable, by the way, because we are declaring this variable in this context. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to add result equals to result plus arguments, and initially the result value will be 0. All right, then I'm going to return the result. If I execute this, you can see it is 19. Is it actually 19? 3 plus 2 5 plus 6 11, then 8 19. So this is how you accept variable number of arguments using this arguments keyword. So one key thing to remember here, that if you use arrow function, then you cannot use this arguments keyword. For arrow function, we have a different way of accessing the variable number of arguments. Okay, let's write that also. Okay, so if you don't want to use arguments, you can also access your arguments like this dot 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 keyword here. Okay, if you use .arg, let's say the variable name is args. Okay, I'm going to comment out this code and just print console log args just to inspect the value. You can see in this arg is actually an array, and in the array we're having all the arguments. Now simply write args here, also args, and execute. This is working. So this is the modern way of writing variable number of arguments, and arrow function supports it. If you're using arrow function, then you can write this type of argument passing. And if you write this type of triple dot structure, and then you can also pass some arguments like this. Let's say I have num1, then comma num2, comma, then dot, let's say rest. Let's remove the code for now. So this means we're getting 2 as num1, 3 as num2, and the rest value we are getting in this rest array. So let's not complicate this further, because functions is a really vast topic. You can do a lot of things. We'll learn all those things later in some other video, but for now, learn the basic functions and just practice writing this kind of functions, simple functions. All right, I hope you have learned something. If you have any questions, then please ask me in the comment section. I will try to answer them. And if you liked it, please hit like. And also, if you're really liking this series, then please subscribe so that you can get notified to all the future videos that I'm going to make. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.